Hello, hello, friends. Thank you for tuning into the Odd Thoughts Podcast. At the Odd Thoughts Podcast, we like to talk about the everyday odd thoughts, have conversations on relatable topics, and just discuss whatever comes to mind. My name is Gunther, and I am your host. Welcome to episode 45. For episode 45, I wanted to start off by talking about creative inspiration. As someone who wants to do my best to kind of indulge in creativity, I find it hard sometimes to expand my thought on what inspiration I can take in my creative endeavors. Next, I wanted to talk about the concept of sore losing. Who a sore loser is, the person who thinks they can compete against everybody, who's always competitive in nature, who wants that desired advantage, and unfortunately, when that advantage doesn't happen, they take it out on everybody else and always have that exterior blame. Next, I wanted to talk a little bit about carelessness. I think there's a certain importance in life to care about the things you do in life and the decisions you make. And when you have a certain lackadaisicalness, a certain carelessness, it only has a negative effect in the outcomes you have and with the negative behaviors that you show, the negative patterns that you show. Lastly, I wanted to end it on talking about my favorite video game console of all time, the PlayStation 2. I just wanted to shout it out. It's the best selling console of all time. You got to give a little love to it. And it shaped my love for gaming for years and years to come. But yeah, if you want to listen to any of those topics, continue tuning in. I appreciate everybody for tuning in, as always. But before we go anywhere else, how's everybody doing? I hope everybody's doing okay. I know I am doing okay. Um, One of the first topic I'll talk about is creative inspiration. I've been doing a lot of I'm trying to hone in on certain things. One of my things right now I'm most interested in is trying to write a book. That's kind of I realize that that's so much easier said than done. And I kind of got over the intimidation of having to write down a lot of words because stories just kind of come eventually, hopefully try to come a little naturally. I want to try to do my best to, expand on certain things, but yeah, I find it hard to kind of outline the book more so. I think the physical processing of you come up with a story, but then how does the story function and how does the character move throughout the story? It's kind of hard. And also I think I'm trying to take a more direct approach sometimes with that where I'm trying to find more direct, focus on this one thing, focus on this one story. And I'm kind of doing that with my artwork as well. I think as I'm haven't dove into any mediums besides just drawing. So I'm trying to do my best and just honing in on certain things, like get good at doing this and I want to start trying to draw whole pieces. I draw a lot of just sketches and or small things that just aren't put together and half done. But I'm trying to do more of the creative things in general and I crave so hard to be like a creative person. I want to indulge in all things that I feel make me feel creative and that looks different for me than a lot of other people. I look at other authors or I look at artists and I'm like, man, how do they do that? How do you come up with ideas and how do you find your style? But it takes time. I kind of, I neglected feeding into creativity for a long time and I didn't want to write and I didn't want to draw and I didn't want to do that stuff and I didn't believe maybe that I was good enough for it. But I've come around to I know that I can do it. I always had a love for it. So what makes me say I can't be a creative person and I can't indulge in creativity? I think it's something that we all kind of look for. I know that I'm always looking for something outside of just living, right? Just breathing and, taking care of myself. So art and writing is what I leaned into. And maybe down the road, I want to make films, do films in general, act or whatever, make films, write stories for films. I'll do that eventually. And music, I would love to get involved in music. I gotta find my voice a little bit, or more so my confidence in my voice. But I'll do that one day. It's all about just trying to find certain inspirations and just pushing creativity into my life as much as possible. But yeah, enough rambling. Let's hop into episode 45. I try to consider myself a creative person. I not necessarily I don't know, an artist or anything like that. I'm not like, I don't know. Like I said, I just consider myself a creative person or someone who enjoys trying to be creative. And I do a little bit of everything. I try to do a little bit of everything, and I get scared about diving into certain, certain mediums and stuff like that. But in the things that I do, I just try to enjoy it. And I find it hard to always kind of like come up with things that inspire me. I mean, I like looking at real life for inspiration and stuff like that. And whether I'm drawing something or I'm writing something, I tend to kind of think of things realistically. Like when I draw things, I just draw basic perspective pictures or things that I have a hard time visualizing anything, abstract or something like that. And then when I'm writing, I always feel like I'm writing like not like based off a true story type things, but I'm trying to like write realistic stories or whatever. And I wish that I wasn't so based in realism in that way. Now I can draw inspirations from real life, like I think that's what every creative person or whatever does. But I want to, I want to try to become more inspired in different ways. I think like, creative inspiration is something that you can find in a bunch of different places and whether it's really realistic or you can kind of pull away and, think of something super like fantasy wise or something made up, something, abstract. I think that's pretty cool. But I mean like I think that if I have that mentality of just being so, zoned in on like real life and that's what I'm kind of interested in, I think that's a good start, at least. I'm kind of at least drawing things and writing about things to my, I can see with my eye and I can, read up on easily and stuff. And then maybe with that kind of mindset, then I can just like, rearrange the truth or whatever. Take something that's real and then just make it as like fake as I don't know how that would work. But I want to be like someone that can create something crazy. And I have an imagination, enough of imagination, but my imagination limits out on like I said, it's like I can't believe stories that I'm telling myself or I can't look at a drawing I'm doing and like say like, oh, that's it kind of pulls me away when it doesn't feel as real. When it's just like I'm just drawing shapes or I'm just writing about nonsense. I have to have like a I don't know. It has to be like it just has to be associated with real life. I'm gonna try to do my best to like take myself out of that though. I like thinking of cool stories, and it doesn't have to be super complex. And you think of something like it's amazing that something like The Hobbit or like the Lord of the Rings series in general, just that deep in lore that Tolkien like that he created. It's crazy. Or something like like Game of Thrones or like Harry Potter or whatever. Like creating a whole world with like characters and creatures and magic or whatever it's based in, and that's unreal to me. And it's based in a realism where their characters still in they're living in a real world and the things they're dealing with are real. So it's not like it's like that kind of stuff's not far away from my eyes and not far away from my mind. And I think some of my favorite styles of art, like I said, I love like realism, but I also love like surrealism. I like things that like look like they're realistic, but they have like some sort of abstractity, like some sort of oddity that makes them different than like the real thing, like a Salvador Dali type thing. I like that. I think that always piques my interest and it makes me just try to think of things, but it just, I don't know. My style, I don't know if I have like an art style, but like I said, it's very like I try to go for realistic things and a lot of it's just like, straighter lines and I feel like I don't have a lot of rounded out things and I struggle with like characteristics and or like personality in certain drawings. Like, I could draw boxes and lines all day like dude. But it's hard to like sometimes put a certain personality into things or certain character into things. But I can make up characters, but it's all going to be real or like realistic. Or I can, like I said, I can draw a basic looking house, or a basic looking like side street of some sort or whatever. Like that's what literally my whole like all my drawings are. And right now, I'm like really trying to get into like drawing people and try to get into that more. But that's the whole I think if I start with like I said, if I start with the things I can see and the things that are real to me, then I could just pull away from that. Just like in writing. Like I'll take that factor into writing. That's what it is. I can think of, certain characters in my life or certain, aspects of myself and I can, draw it out or I can, expand it in some sort of way and make it, unrealistic, but still have that sort of realism to it. I just like get so obsessed. I think like I get so like obsessive with like doubting myself because like maybe there's an idea that the next idea is better or something like that. That if I get too ingrained in one thing, then I'm going to limit everything else. Like, and I don't get that. I like doubt everything I say. I'm like, well, I don't know. Like, you realize that in certain like, I want to be a writer more than anything. Like, that's kind of like what I just appreciate stories. But one of the things that I think is fun is like coming up with like any sort of idea, like the journey your character takes or the overall theming arch of what's happening. And you try to keep it super basic and you realize that certain things can be basic. When I read like something like, Stephen King's books, like he's very descriptive on a lot of things, but there's a lot of other things that he just never really describes fully. Like when you read The Shining, he never describes what The Shining is. You just know it's like some sort of supernatural thing, but you don't really know like the extents of to what The Shining is or, what it is or whatever. He's like some sort of, astral being or whatever, but from outer space or whatever, but you don't know what he is. You don't know what his powers are. You don't know what he it's so there's certain things in a story you really never need to like, say or describe. Like if your character's never looking at something or never experiencing something, you don't need to know about it. If certain aspects of their life aren't important to their, story, then there's no reason for that. If like you're making up some sci-fi story and it takes place on a specific planet, we don't need to know about the other planets that surround it necessarily unless they're going to those planets or something like that. So that's something that like I've learned a little bit with like narrative, like when I've been writing, is that you don't need to over embellish every single thing. Like if I'm writing a scary story and it takes place at like a haunted motel, I don't necessarily need to know the history of the motel from the inception it started. I just need to know what happens that makes it a scary place. Like why is it scary? And I can sprinkle in the outline and the background throughout the story. I don't have to have a whole, chapter dedicated to the background unless it's like a super important thing. If it's like if it's about the multiple evils that the motel has or the hotel has, then you would want to describe the hotel. If it's just about this one event that happens one night, we don't need to know about the history. So, it's so much it's like I wish I wasn't so sometimes analytical or research, I wish I didn't research so heavy and I wish I could just be like an open-minded creative and it just flowed like that, but I just I got to kind of give myself a little structure in that way. Like I'd be looking up like word counts in books, like how many words are in novels, like oh dude. I don't know. I just like it's like I try to outline it with like mathematically, like when I'm like right now I'm trying to write a book and I got like the other day I wrote like I just drew out boxes on a piece of paper and I started trying to like fill in the boxes with bits of story that would happen. 'Cause it just made me like visually see what I wanted to happen. But yeah, general just if everything with creativity, like I always want to try to ingest in it as much as possible, but if I think sometimes I do struggle with like thinking too broadly at times, even though that can be very beneficial in the sense of like learning a multitude of styles and trying your best to like, find out how what works. But I think I need to be more in the mindset of like zoning in on one idea. If I find something that I really enjoy, I find like an art style that I like, why not just practice that style? That doesn't have to be the only style I ever do, but let me give myself the most ability in that one thing. And then maybe I can really expound within that one thing. So that's what I'm learning more and more. Like I can have all these ideas and I can float all these ideas, but I really need to try to start honing in on things. And like when it comes to stories, when it comes to like ideas for stories, like just write anything. Like whether it's the most minimal bits of that story, if I just write it down, then maybe I can start achieving other things. Or like if I want to draw something or make any art or something like that, just draw the basic shape of something and then just expound on that. If I want to draw a building, draw the building, draw what perspective it is, and do that. Or like if I want to draw a character, start drawing the anatomy of something, and then go from that. I just that's the whole thing with art. I think is like there is an indefinitiveness in styles, but there's a certain definitiveness with starting. Like you kind of have to initiate to let things happen, but there's no knowing what you're gonna want to do. You're gonna love something for now and then not love something tomorrow. I might write a bit of a story today, not love it tomorrow. Draw something yesterday, and then today it's just not that good for me. But I'm doing my best as a person who wants to be considered creative and wants to ingest myself in creativity for the rest of my life. I'm always trying to do my best to find new creative inspiration. Some of us strive for a certain success in life, certain success in things. Especially when it comes to like people who have a competitive nature, you might like want to try to achieve higher levels of success in certain competitions. Some have a desired advantage over others and want nothing more than to win. When putting all your heart into the idea of winning and ignoring the concept of just enjoying what you're doing, then losing can be really like be a real letdown. People can really despise losing and fester in that experience of a loss. Sore losers are people who can't handle the loss. Those people will put it on others and deny any wrongdoing in that downfall of losing. And to me, losing and winning comes and goes, right? So to really give yourself the best opportunity is to recognize that success will happen when it happens. Being unsuccessful in one area also doesn't mean that you're not going to be successful in other areas, right? I can relate a little bit to being a sore loser. I can admit to that. I think sometimes I take more of a sore losing harsher when it's like a team setting. I think that's always my thing. Like I'm not a super competitive person necessarily, but in a team setting it feels a little worse. I feel like I kind of let down others around me and and even though I may have known I did enough, it just obviously wasn't enough to win. You don't have to put it on yourself though, right? I think it's becoming angry or upset after losing, or failing or being unsuccessful in a certain advantage that you desired. That's the whole thing with like there's some sort of competitiveness attached to sore losers. And also maybe some sore losers can be sore winners, right? It's like one of those things where it's like just as they're so upset about losing, they could be with winning, they just let you know. It's like I don't want that. But it's one of those things where there's usually this with competitiveness, there's a certain desired advantage you want over others, or you believe that you have a level of success or level of ability higher than others. And so when you put that expectation, as it sometimes unfortunately happens when those expectations are not met, that is 100% upsetting and it can make you angry 100%. And so you really fester on that whole like, losing thing. Especially like I said, when you believe that you should have won and you believe that you wanted to be better and you wanted that first place. And inevitably, there is going to be a placing blame on others. That's like the one of the keys I think to like sore losing is you absolutely don't blame yourself ever. Sometimes I think like you'd be a sore loser and blame yourself, but you kind of like let it out on others. But most of the time, the cliche classic like sore loser is someone who's going to blame others 100%, or blame like the competition in general, or not having the right this, not the right that. Everybody knows that person. I'm pretty sure we've all experienced that one person who's definitely like, you know, everybody else did it, or it's everything else besides them. Like, it couldn't possibly be me because of my ability. I think we all know that. And I think even in some people can be competitive in certain things and maybe not overall like competitive over everything. And so like you can lose in one thing and be okay, but then like I said, it's all about that one advantage you think you have. It's all about when that expectation of winning or having that advantage all of a sudden isn't met. That's kind of the whole thing. And there's all these different areas. There's like competition. I think is what I mostly think of with sore losing, but I think losing in like when you like fail a test or something like that, you can be a little sore on that. Be like, oh, these aren't even what we studied. These aren't even the answers that we studied or whatever. Or like classically video games. That's more of what I know, I guess. Yeah, I think that's where I'm more of a sore loser in is It's like when I get bested by a freaking computer thing, like it's a video game. It's a bunch of ones and zeros put onto a disk or put onto a system, and I can't beat it. It's like stupid. It's like I'm perfect. It's the glitch. It's the pixels on the TV, whatever. Sore losing is it's just any of that getting upset when you haven't achieved what you thought you were, when you thought you were a little more capable, and you had that expectation that you were gonna be on top, and you didn't achieve that. But it's not just competition. I think that's what I really think. That's what most people think of. Some people just can't handle defeat. That's the whole thing is some people can't fathom letting themselves down. I guess even more so, right? And especially maybe there was a certain reign of success, or generally you come out on top on certain things. So when those occasional lows happen, it feels extremer. We don't want to let ourselves down. That's a whole thing I think everybody can kind of take in, is that you don't want to let yourself down on anything. And especially when you're trying as hard as possible, and you're showing your abilities, and you're relying on your ability for something, you don't want to let yourself down. But some people just can't. It's like I said, success comes and goes, and sometimes you're just gonna be. Some people are gonna be a little bit better than you. You may bring your A plus game, but one other person might bring either A plus plus game. You might be functioning at 100%, another person's at 102. It was just that day type thing. But so, no, like I said, nobody wants to let themselves down, but some people just take it a little extra. They take it like they can't fathom it. They can't fathom the thought that they weren't able to pull through. And to some people, winning is everything, and success is a total definitive, definition of who they are. And if they're not winning, then what's the point type thing. And I don't think that, it's hard to have a kind of one track mindset. Unfortunately, success is not, it's not the one telling thing, obviously, but success is a helpful thing. It kind of lets people know maybe a certain level of work that you put in. Is like I said, it's not everything. And if you're relying on success, then that's a weird thing to think. Being successful in all life's aspects outside of, jobs and competition, like in life, like you want to be like, what does success mean? Like having the most successful marriage? What does that mean? Like having the most successful kids? What does that mean? Like, so the constant chase for winning and being successful at everything could be a little, you know, endlessly endeavoring. It could be kind of like tiring because you're going to lose eventually. Or things are just not going to be the win that you thought it was. You're not going to reap the sows that you thought you were. It can affect it affects others wanting to compete too. Like it makes it think that like if you're kind of a sore loser, you don't want to play at all. But also, if people know you're a sore loser, that's the whole thing is they don't want to be around you either. You're just not fun to participate alongside. Like I said, just someone who's been a sore loser. People don't want to play games with you. People don't want to play, don't want to do anything with you. You makes it weird to be in a certain environment even when there's no competitive nature in that environment, like outside of just competition, like in a workplace when someone's got certain like desired, I want to be better than everybody in this certain position. I want to do more. It's, unsettling. And it's one of those things where it's like a cool, hard work is cool and wanting to be great is cool, but when you're kind of pushing past everybody and then when it doesn't work out for you and you're kind of blaming everybody else and you're just taking out on everybody else, yeah, I don't want to be around you. Nobody wants to be around you. I understand that, and that's something I understand as an occasional sore loser myself. I understand that like that's what makes like people don't want to be around you when you're reacting that way. So like you can, but also like don't affect it. Don't let it affect yourself too. That's something I've learned is like I don't shouldn't let other people know that I hate losing, but I also shouldn't just like sit on myself and be like, well, you lost, you freaking pathetic piece of crap. Like I said, I'm not losing all the time. I have plenty of wins, and so I just, as I know I'm going to lose, I'm going to win at times. There is, you know, when people put in a certain importance into winning, it's because they want like a power or something like that. There's this being on top, this kind of like, it's like, I don't know, it's like, it's a dynamic. It's this dominance that some people will feel that they need. They just want to be on top of everybody else, and winning is that one thing that's going to put them on top only in that competitive nature though. I mean, like, mentally or like, how people view you, they're not going to view you on top when you're making it like a big deal. And it's one of them things. When you're a sore loser and you win, nobody's going to cheer for you. It doesn't make no sense. And often like with those people obsessed with that winning mentality, there's kind of they want to negate others' accomplishments. They want to make it seem like they were the better than everybody else, and nobody else tried hard because they succeeded, and like they were successful because everybody else was bummy or something like that. I hate that nature of things. Like, like I said, some days people just perform a little bit better than others, and you might bring 100% and win. You might bring 100% and lose. Some people it's just like, it just happens kind of thing. It's just, like I said, it's ain't nobody else, nothing says you're going to be successful. Nothing ensures it. Hard work is the best thing you can put in, right? But if you're kind of pushing it against on everybody else and you're saying, I'm working harder than you, and when hard work doesn't pay off all of a sudden, which occasionally it doesn't, and then you're blaming everybody else. It's just not gonna. It never ends out well. It never ends out well. I think like it obviously does feel good to win though, 100%. And trying hard and becoming successful is awesome, but achievement or success isn't guaranteed. Like I said, it feels good, and so when that achievement happens, it's cool to relish in it. But you shouldn't be throwing it in other people's faces, and like when it doesn't happen, you shouldn't be blaming other people or blaming every exterior, XYZ ABC MNO like thing besides yourself. Unfortunately, you're gonna have to take accountability when things don't work out. It's not like you're letting yourself down outrightly. It is a bit of that, but it's not like you're letting yourself down completely. It's just in this one moment, and you didn't necessarily let yourself down. It's just someone else pulled extra through. You know what I'm saying? You just got to remember to do your best in any situation. It doesn't, like I said, you don't have to have a competitive nature. Just always remember to do your best, and best may not be enough, but who cares? Like, it's some days it will, and some days it won't. You just got to be okay with that. You felt like you put enough effort, and that's gonna look a lot different to other people. Obviously, that, like we're talking about sore losers, there's gonna be people who think that the success is what shows that hard work. Others, it's respect from others. If people are telling you that you're working hard, that's a thing. Or like, if you come home from work and you feel like you've done everything you could, that's another aspect or whatever. Or come home from a competition, whatever it may be. You know what I'm saying? You know, it's like sometimes you're just outdone by someone more capable. One loss doesn't equate to overall losing. Sometimes, some days people are just going to be a little bit better. Things are just going to be a little bit, sway in a different direction than yours. That doesn't mean anything like overall. You're going to go into another space and you might just dominate. It doesn't mean you have to shift every single mindset. Sometimes it's just like one of them things where you'll just dominate in a different space once in a while. And if you get dominated in another space and you end up not being as successful, it doesn't matter. It really, truly doesn't matter. Just cherish the wins as they come. um, you got to kind of have a humble nature, I think, right? And that's the whole thing is, humility. Having a humbleness to yourself. That's something that, just be appreciative that you're in a position to compete, be in a position to be successful, and then if you just work hard at it and do all you can to be yourself, and then if things show through that kind of thing, that just should just tell you that at least you did something, and at least you believed in yourself. I'm Like I said, I know that I'm definitely a sore loser at times, but I tell myself that losing isn't everything because when winning happens, like I'm not a sore winner. Like sometimes maybe a little bit. Sometimes I don't mind throwing it into people's faces, but it's all in like if someone's throwing it back in my face, I'm gonna obviously throw it in your face. But if it's not the time or place, then I'm not gonna throw it back in your face. Like I'll cherish my personal achievements when it comes, and I'm learning, as everybody should, that when I'm not successful in certain things and I lose at certain things, it's not everything. It's important to have a certain awareness of what you do in life, a certain consciousness of how you like exist. You must notice and understand the way you navigate. With existence, we need to care about the consequences for the missteps we take. Realize that there is a direct outcome to not being aware of how we live. When someone is oblivious to what they do, they are careless of the outcomes of such actions that they take. Carelessness is a lackadaisical way of existence where there is no concern for the behaviors you show. To those you are careless to, they may believe there is nothing that there are like the people who you are careless to, you may believe that you're doing nothing wrong. Carelessness blocks the knowledge people can have through experiences and through the understanding of those experiences. We need to make an effort to care about how we live and how the aspects around us can shape oneself and how we might affect others as well. when someone is careless, when they have a certain carelessness to them, they have like a certain lack of awareness in their actions, and it unfortunately results in unintentional consequences. I think it's hard to sit there and say like you should think about every little thing you do and how it's going to affect everything, but there is a difference between noticing certain things and when you how it affects your life or how it affects others, and just outrightly just being like, I don't give a crap, like I don't care what I do. I think like, I'm someone that analyzes every little thing I do. I truly do. But it's not necessarily like because like I'm a shitty person. It's just I don't want to seem careless. I know unfortunately with the things I do and my existence, it's going to rub against others and it's going to affect others. And I don't have to think about like the deeper meanings of that, but I should think about like these unfortunate consequences that might come. If it brings this unbearingness to others, then there's no point of doing something. There's no point of living a certain way. You need to make a change then. It's like being oblivious to consequences through lack of concern for behavior. It's just not the way to live. When you're kind of one of those things where you're just thinking like, oh, I'm going to be me. I'm just going to be what I am. I mean, that's not a bad way to think. I'm not going to sit there and say don't be yourself. But like, if yourself is affecting things in a consequential way, and you just decide to be oblivious to it, you're not doing yourself any due justice. It's a very lackadaisical existence. And, you're just kind of going out there and you're making choices for yourself, and you're going to have to deal with it, and you may be willing to deal with it. But the consequences you just decide not to be willing to deal with. And especially like sometimes people just like, things pile on for people. People got a lot on their plates and they got a lot to deal with. And they don't even want to think about the outside world, which is fair enough. When you got too much on your plate, why do you want to worry about other people's plates? But when you're kind of like, taking things off of other people's plates and you're cutting people in line, trying to get stuff on your plate first, or taking off your plate first, there's obviously it's just, it's careless. It's just not a good way to live necessarily. Go ahead and be a careless person, but it's just not, it doesn't do nothing for you. Some people just are indifferent to what outcomes happen, and they're never really truly perturbed with consequences in life. Nothing feels too serious. And even though it might be serious for others, if it don't affect you, then why matter, right? It's just a shitty mentality. Something I think maybe I've been guilty of for sure. I can't sit here and say that I haven't been careless or maybe haven't chosen to be like have a certain carelessness. Sometimes when you kind of maybe feel like you need to be a little careless, and that's a weird thing to say, like, but when you're in a certain environment where other people don't care about you, like you have if you as a person have a bad family, I have a great family, so I don't have to worry about that. Or if you worked at shitty jobs, which I have worked at shitty jobs, there's a certain carelessness you might have. Like you don't care about others, so like you don't care what you do or how you interact with others, and the consequences of that just really don't matter to you. And then in that sense, when it's kind of become a response, like a carelessness response, then I guess, like I said, it's a petty. It's petty. I mean, it's not a good thing to be careless at all. But that's just petty. Like because other people are affecting you negatively doesn't mean you have to then be a negative yourself and act like you're doing something by those kind of things, but not caring about how you act or caring about the things that happen or based off of what you do, the outcomes that happen. I don't know, like what leads into a certain carelessness. I think sometimes there's a certain, lack of experience of life. Some things just maybe don't hit you particularly hard, and you kind of just are walking through, just bumping things off of you, and that's unfortunate. And I could say that's lucky, but I mean, like, if you don't go through any hardships and you never have any of that, something to kind of teach you a lesson, and you definitely don't sit there, and maybe if you do get a chance to learn a lesson, if you sit there and you don't want to learn that lesson, it piles up a lack of experience. You just become inexperienced in life, and so you're just kind of making choices off of immaturity and like an ignorance, and you're just not taking the time to know how it's gonna. You're not caring about what you're doing. That's the opposite of carelessness, isn't it? Is caring. Just have a little care in the things that you do. Like, and you're gonna take missteps. I mean, it's the truth, So that's the whole thing. Is like you can see, I rather not be. I don't want to be the person to sit there and like never take a step, even though I've become that person at times. But I mean, like, if that first step is obviously going to step on the throats of others, and there's going to be some sort of a bad consequence because of it, then I'm going to especially ignore that. I'm going to especially ignore that one thing. because I just know it's not a good thing. It's a negative thing. It takes away when you kind of have a lack of experience, it takes away from actual understanding in life, right? It allows perception by others to be unideal type thing. It's like you just think that I don't know, like it's like maybe in that way of carelessness, you just think that nothing good is even going to come out of anyways. That even it doesn't matter. Like there's what you do is just going to turn out bad, or what you do is going to turn out how it is. So like, why should I care about it? I don't, it's a weird way to. It's a weird way. It's definitely an unideal way to think of things, but and I don't know what necessarily ideal is for everybody. It's a little different for everybody, right? People have certain ideologies to their life and how things should turn out. And if you're just sitting there and you're constantly having a perception of like, well, it's always going to be unideal, or it's always going to be like not how I want it. That could bring on carelessness. I can see how that can bring on carelessness. But you need to take a little bit of that care. I mean, it's important to think that, well, maybe it does. At the end of the day, like I said, unfortunately, you exist on this earth with other people. Not unfortunately, but know, outside of your own life, you're gonna bump into others, you're gonna interact with other people, and like you're also gonna like so I guess also I always think about maybe it affecting other people with carelessness, but in your own life too, like obviously with that lack of experience, or things will just eventually pile up and it just becomes harsher, and it just leans into that like, well, nothing good comes out of it type thing. When you kind of constantly put that stuff off and you're always saying like, well, it's you know what I'm saying. Yeah, I'm kind of just reiterating at that. Sometimes it makes people might think of you in that way too. If you're a careless person, people are just going to have a different perception of you too. And like I said, it's hard. It don't walk around always thinking what people think, but it's gonna make its rearing head at you eventually. And if enough people let you know and they judge you based off of like how you're acting, and they judge you harder than others, you can sit there and say, in some circumstances, it's them being a negative for no reason, and maybe through their own, bad whatever feelings, they're just taking it out on you. There needs to be a certain point where you kind of question it yourself. I always like I always reference this interview on Joe Rogan that David Goggins did, where he was talking about like, if someone comes up to you and they call you stupid, like, that might be a mean thing for them to say, obviously, like, and who's the right for them to say it, but you might be an idiot. Someone might call you fat, and that is a mean thing to say, and what's your right to call someone else fat? But like, you might be fat. So it's one of them things where it's kind of like, someone judges you for no reason. People do 100%, but there got to be a certain point where certain judgment or certain people's responses to you got to say something like where it's like, oh, like, well, like, I guess, like, people are trying to tell me that I'm acting a certain way, and like, the way I'm behaving and the way I'm like doing things in life, or the lack of things I'm doing in life, are really showing its head, and people are showing that it's showing its head. Like I said, it's hard to think about walking around and always think about what people think of you, but it's at the end of the day, when you don't care about yourself and you're just not caring about how you're acting, that's the one outlying tale that's going to tell you how your presence is in the world. When you've decided your presence doesn't matter, that's what someone else has got to tell you that. The world's got to tell you it in some way. But how do you avoid carelessness? That's a big question, I think. I think when you starting to realize mistakes, you don't have to always be like realize the mistake before it's a mistake. But if you're someone that has constantly perpetuated a certain negative outcome to something, based off of your behavior, based how you interact, your carelessness, then you might realize it eventually. And when you realize that mistake, there might be certain steps you can take to, you know, undo that mistake. It's hard. It's in this, what's also with the filtering of like, what's the most important mistake and what affects me most. I think taking it, just realizing all of it, realize all of it first. But most of the time, that's the whole thing, is like it's all these things that you start to realize that it is affecting you. As long as you have that realization that maybe carelessness is making things worse, right? And then once you realize the few mistakes that you make, you kind of track those mistake patterns. You know that based off of how you do this thing, or how you're doing this, or this, whatever, da 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 da, there's a certain pattern that you follow. There's a certain mindset you immediately follow into, and that's what ends up, it always ends up to the same outcome. So you start to track that, and you start to say, like, once things start to happen and you start to take a couple of those familiar steps, you kind of stop yourself and you say, like, okay, well, I got to slow down and, take a little time to prepare. That's a big thing, is like, you might like even before you jump into something, and as you realize maybe some past mistakes, the future mistakes may be a little better avoidable when you take some time and you slow down a little bit and you say like, well, I've made these mistakes and this situation could be a little similar and based off of this and based off of that, or I haven't dealt with this one thing in a while. But it doesn't hurt to take a little time to prepare. It really doesn't. It's important to have that concept of taking one thing at a time. You got to realize that, how does this work? And then how is it, caring is just making sure that you're taking enough steps. It's who knows how many steps into things and who knows the process of things, but the opposite of caring or carelessness is caring, and caring is just like doing your best to put yourself in a good position and act yourself correctly to give yourself the best outcome in whatever situation, and double checking yourself and with like that's the whole thing with like organizing and prioritizing things is like you understand what you actually need, and you understand like what's best serving you and what's best not serving you, and you get to like then else before you step into a certain situation, you understand that like, okay, I know this is what I need. You've done them double checking, you know this is, you're ready for it. And when you're ready and you have that preparedness, it can avoid carelessness 100%. But it's hard to sit there and say that you should be aware of every little thing you do, because you can become over aware in the sense of like paranoid or scared, or you fear the steps that you're going to take. But there is inevitably sometimes moments and mistakes you will make, and if you're someone who like you make a mistake and you learn from it, that's on you. That's great. That's a caring mindset. You're caring about your existence. You're caring about being your, doing your due diligence to have a good life and have a good understanding of things. But if you sit there and you're blind to the outcome, you're a little lackadaisical, you kind of say like, it doesn't matter, this doesn't matter. Carelessness just perpetuates just a negativity on you, and you're just going to push off a certain amount of things in your life, and everything will just become a negative behavior associated with you, and people will then associate negativity with you as well. And like I said, it don't you don't have to sit there and think about how everybody thinks of you, but eventually if you are just enacting enough carelessness behavior, then it's going to show itself no matter what. Throughout my whole life, I have involved myself with video games. Video games have always been a source of entertainment, and I have 100% always enjoyed it. My earlier years, like when I was younger, the first couple years of my life, I remember my family we had a PlayStation and we had a Dreamcast as well. And they weren't really mine. They were like my dad's and my older sisters and yada yada, but it's not like I didn't get to play them. And that was the whole start for my love of video games. But we're really kind of, I think, what the my conceptualization of when I really started to understand video games and like I enjoyed them, and I remember like thinking like, oh, I want this game, I want this next game, was around the PlayStation 2 era. I still say till this day that the PlayStation 2 is my favorite console of all time. And we've come a couple generations of gaming consoles since then. And I've like I still play it till this day. I have it sitting up in my room right now. I'm looking at it in my closet as we're speaking. But I think about all the freaking games I had on there, and it was right after my parents split, so I was like 5 years old or whatever. And my mom bought me a PlayStation, I think. I think she bought me a PlayStation 2. And I don't remember asking for it. That's the funny thing is like I said, I don't remember asking for it, but once I had it, then I remember gaming kind of coming in for me. But it would have been around that 2001, yeah, because the PlayStation 2 was released in 2000 and it ran till 2013, which is pretty funny to think they were making PlayStations in 2013, easily after the frickin' PlayStation 3 and the next generation of consoles came out. But like I said, that's when everything really kind of zoned in, and I put so many hours into it, and I think, like I said, it's my favorite. And I was doing a little research on it, decided that like, why not look it up a little bit? And I've done this in the past, and I've kind of looked up like some of the best consoles. And I bought like an Xbox 360, when I was younger from babysitting money, and I did my research on that, and that was kind of the hot console at the time. And but I was, I thought it'd be fun to kind of look into the PlayStation 2, not just talk about my love for the PlayStation, but literally talk about like, how it's like the biggest, like how big it was. I don't want to spoil it too much because I want to give into it a little bit. But the PlayStation 2 is considered the best selling gaming console of all time, made by Sony. I know that the PlayStation in general, I think, was started by Nintendo. And I'm not joking on that. I think they were gonna put out the PlayStation, but then through some patents or whatever, you know what I'm saying? Just through whatever type thing, they just couldn't do it. And so Sony bought the rights to it and put out the PlayStation. And Sony was a prominent enough, technology and electronics company at the time. And so like they just made it like themselves. And the first PlayStation was revolutionary in the sense of like it was the first to kind of feature 3D games. Everything before that was kind of the bits, the 8-bit, 16-bit, 32-bit, side scrolling, 2D, maybe isometric kind of views. And but that generation of consoles was when 3D gaming became like a thing. And even a little bit before that, because like I don't know if the N64 came out after or before the PlayStation. Anyways, but that was around that time that like 3D gaming became like a thing where it's like it became like a 3D world. You can explore the world and things looked a little bit better and the textures looked a little more in depth. And PlayStation was ahead on that. It's still till this day they have like graphically, I say the best like graphics, graphically the best graphics. But easily, it's the PlayStation 5. Like I don't have one, but I watch a lot of gameplay on it, and the graphics look amazing. I mean, all newer generation of consoles look great, but it's quite amazing. And over 4,000 games put out. I mean, I didn't play 4,000 games. I probably played 100, maybe 200 of those games, maybe. But like to think that like 4,000 games over that lifetime, and how many popular games there really were. And it came out like the sixth generation of consoles. Now we're on like I guess like the 10th generation of consoles or whatever. And if we're talking about like the first generation of consoles, those are like the ColecoVision, the Intellivision, Atari. Those are the first generation of consoles. And then you move on to things like the Nintendo and Super Nintendo, Sega Genesis, and Sega Saturn, and just started revolutionizing. And you to think that it seemed like the fifth or the sixth generation is when gaming really took off. I think in the sense of like it was kind of popular. It kind of like when it burst onto the scene, it died of popularity really quick. But with Nintendo and like Sega coming on the scene, it really revitalized gaming. And the '90s was like peak gaming, and only I think only became like better. I guess I shouldn't say peak. It just was like starting that peak. But so all the consoles that were all in the sixth generation. So there was the PlayStation 2, which sold 155 million units, which is still the most till this day. That's the total number of units by PlayStation 2 or by any console, and it's still the most till this day. Another console, the Nintendo GameCube, that one only sold 21.74 million units over its time. Next was the Sega Dreamcast, which was the last gaming console Sega put out. That sold 9.13 million units. And then there was the Xbox, which was 24 million units. So the Xbox taking a quick second place right off that bat. And Xbox, I knew Xbox was popular at that time too. I kind of always remember that's when conversations started coming up with like, are you PlayStation or Xbox? Are you PlayStation or Xbox? Especially, I think more so. I guess maybe more the Xbox 360, PlayStation 3 era, but 100%. I kind of remember as a kid with the PlayStation 2 that being a thing. It was like, do you have Xbox? Do you have PlayStation? PlayStation was the clear winner, man. I mean, like, I loved my PlayStation 2. That big black, like, boxy box. Like, it was just like, and it had like a cool, rigid look, and it was awesome, man. I mean, I loved playing the PlayStation 2. Like I said, I still own it till this day. And it's like I said, it's the best-selling console of all time. 155 million units. It's number one. But I did write down the other top 10. So let's just configure in the other top 10. Number two is the Nintendo DS at 154.02 million units sold, which is crazy. That's so much. I mean, Nintendo really like they dominate because of the accessibility of their games and how easy it is to play like Nintendo games. They dominate this whole list pretty much. Number three is the Nintendo Switch, which 132.46 million, which is amazing. I've always kind of thought the Switch would be cool. I might own one if I had enough money like that. The Game Boy, the original Game Boy, 118.69 million. That's number 4. I had an original Game Boy. I think I remember, or I no, I didn't have an original Game Boy. I had a Game Boy Advance, which does pop up on the list later. But Game Boy was fun. That was the first handheld or like the really first good handheld console, and it turned into the DS basically. Number 5 on the list, right? Yes, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Number 5 is PlayStation 4 with 117.2 million, which is pretty amazing. I have a PlayStation 4. That was like, after the Xbox 360, I was like, I'm not going back to Xbox. Like, I immediately was down for a PlayStation 4. My mom bought me my PlayStation 4. Next on the list, number 6 was the PlayStation 1, which I had the PlayStation 1. My family had the PlayStation 1. 102.49 million. So we're still in the 100 million. That's crazy. Next after that is the Wii, 101.63 million, which is, like the Wii was popping for a second. And I know for a fact that one of the best-selling video games of all time is Wii Sports because it was thrown in with every Wii console. So it's a little inflated, but it's funny to think that. Next, PlayStation 3 with 87.4 million, which is that's insane. I have a PlayStation 3, but I have it like retroactively. Like I got it like a few years ago from someone who just wasn't using it. You know what I'm saying? And like I love the PlayStation 3. There's some games I love on that. I remember playing like some of those games. Like some are console exclusive, but cross platforms. Like I remember playing like Xbox 360 games, and I always thought like it just doesn't look as good. Maybe it'd be better on PlayStation, and I've gotten a chance to play them, and they do look better. Number 9 on the list is Xbox 360 with 84 million. So still a lot. We're under the 100 million, obviously, but I had an Xbox 360. I just remember it being like it just was more popular at the initial release in the PlayStation 3. Obviously, the PlayStation 3 is higher on the list, but I just remember it being more popular when it was first released. And then last, number 10 on the list is Game Boy Advance, which I had the Game Boy Advance and the Game Boy Advance SP, but the Game Boy Advance came first, 81.51 million units, which is unreal. That's just so many. And like, how many freaking, what Nintendo has? One, two, three, four, five. Five consoles on the top five, which is unreal. And then Xbox has one, and PlayStation makes out the other four. It's so funny. But I've always felt that way about like Nintendo is the accessibility. Nintendo is for every gamer. It's like anybody who's like first starting games, Nintendo makes it easy. If you want to play with your friends, Nintendo makes it easy. If you want to play with your family, Nintendo makes it easy. PlayStation has always been generated on like solo gaming, like single player games and good graphics and like storytelling games. So it's like popular. It's like the two sides of gaming. Some people like to game with others, and some people like to game by themselves. It's just a balance between the two. Like it's just PlayStation has always been that more single player centric game. And obviously, it does include a lot of like online games. I mean, it did include online. Even like I think the PlayStation 2 did, but it just wasn't like big. But Xbox came out, and that was the whole thing with Xbox is like Xbox online play is like exceptional. That's Microsoft back. So if you want to play if you want to play online games, go play Xbox or go play PC or your laptop or computer or whatever sorts, yada yada. Blah, blah, blah. Also, one thing that made the PlayStation always amazing, at least up to the well, I guess only the PlayStation 2 really, because I'm talking about the PlayStation 2, but backwards compatibility. You can take PlayStation 1 games and play them on the PlayStation 2. And nowadays you can't do that. You can't play like PS2 games on the PS3 or PS3 games on the PS4, but you can buy them off the store. I mean, I already got the games. I don't want to buy a whole new. I don't want to buy it again. Like, so that's why like I like holding on to the old consoles, and I would love like to be able to just put it in my new PS4. But obviously, I understand like what's the it's I understand. I don't, but I do. I wish backwards compatibility was like the standard for all. You know what I'm saying? But so just besides just the PlayStation 2 dominating in sales as a console, so many legendary games to like what I know. I looked up the top 10 best-selling games of all time on the PlayStation 2. Many of them I've played, like some of them I have not. And like but they were obviously still like popular to a lot of people. So I'll run through it real quick though. Number one best-selling game is GTA San Andreas. Released in 2004, 33 million games sold, copies sold. That's my favorite game of all time. I literally say GTA San Andreas is my favorite game of all time. It's a little weird to say that, but it was the open world. I had played GTA 3 and I had played Vice City, and I love those games, but San Andreas just was like 100 times more content, way bigger map, just way better of a game. Next on the list, number two, Gran Turismo 3 A Spec is what it was called. 2001, 14.89 million copies sold. And Gran Turismo pops up a couple times. Grand Theft Auto does as well, but Gran Turismo, I never played racing games a lot. I do remember the PlayStation 1 Gran Turismo, the first one, but I don't remember like any other ones. I wasn't really into racing games, but still till this day, like racing games like Horizon, yeah, Forza Horizon, Forza, like that is probably the more popular game franchise now, but racing is still a very big thing. Number three on the list is Gran Turismo 4. 2004 is when it was put out, $11.76 million. Like I said, racing games were pretty big. Number four on the list is GTA Vice City, 2002, 1.5 million copies sold. I think that's what like when GTA 3 is the one that popularized GTA like as a whole because it adapted to the 3D modeling. This is what I'm saying. When games started changing, it adapted to it, and Vice City was just cooler. It was cool to have that 80s Miami Vice vibe. You know what I'm saying? Next on the list, number five is Final Fantasy X, which is 2001, 8.5 million. I haven't played parts of Final Fantasies, but it's so funny to think that it's the 10th one all the way in 2001. I mean, like, that's a legendary game franchise all the way back in the 80s, like the Nintendo days. So I haven't played too many Final Fantasies. I played even like some Kingdom Hearts, but like few parts of everything. Next on the list, number six is GTA 3. 2001 is when it came out, 8.305 million copies sold. That was like the one that I remember playing most and ingesting in like first. I just remember like you could run around and drive cars. That was really all I remember. I was only five, you know what I'm saying? Or four going on five. Next on that on the list, so I'm on what, one, two, three, four, five, six, whatever. I'll just keep going. Sorry, I lost count. Metal Gear Solid 2, Sons of Liberty, 2001, 7.03 million copies. This is, I think, the what really popularized the Metal Gear Solid franchise. I think maybe I'm tripping on that. I think like the original Metal Gear Solid came out like on Super Nintendo and people liked it, but it was kind of ahead of its time. But eventually, as gaming kind of became more popular, the graphics looked a little better. Metal Gear Solid became famous, and I always hear about the second one, the Sons of Liberty, more than anything. Yeah, 2001, 7.03 million copies. Tekken 5 is next on the list. 2005 is when it was released, so kind of a later release. But that was 6 million copies sold, which is pretty all right. That's a lot. And fighting games are always going to be popular, just like racing games are popular. And Tekken is like this weird franchise where it's not weird in the sense that it's bad. It's like it has like a running storyline with it. And if you ever look into the Tekken lore, I'd suggest just doing it on your own time. Yeah, 2005, 6 million. Next on the list, Final Fantasy 12, which came out in 2006, 6 million copies sold. That's a later release as well, 100%. Like I said, I've never played the Final Fantasy games all the way through. I've played little bits and pieces. I know that 10 was really popular. I don't think 12 was like, I know 6 million is a lot of copies, but I don't think it was that popular. And then to round out the list, last on the list is Kingdom Hearts, 2002, 5.9 million copies. The Kingdom Hearts took over every. I mean, like I know so many people tell this day. I literally have like my older sister's best friend's son. His name is Roxas, off of Kingdom Hearts. So it's literally like it's part of pop culture. It's more than just a game, and it's freaking Disney mixed with Final Fantasy. I mean, how can you hate that? It brings like amazing worlds together. You can't hate that. You literally cannot hate that. But it's so funny to think about like GTA really surrounds out that list, huh? And like a couple Gran Turismos, a couple Final Fantasies, really technically three Final Fantasies. But those were the kind of when you think about those games too, those are graphically awesome looking games. That's the whole thing is like these weren't online games. I mean, Tekken 5 is pretty funny to have on there because it's a fighting game. But I mean, everything else, these are graphically amazing games. But yeah, that's the top 10. I mean, there's so many others. Like I came up with my own list. I don't have any like how many are sold, but just shouting out like a few other of my favorite games. Like I remember playing like Bully. that was one of my favorite games. It was literally it was high school GTA. It was Rockstar's, endeavor into something outside the crime world, adultness, and I loved Bully. I always hope for another Bully. We get all these GTAs, we get all these Red Deads, but we don't get a freaking another Bully. I don't think we'll ever will. Not GTA, but Guitar Hero 3, Legends of Rock. The first two Guitar Heroes were really big. I remember playing one in like fifth grade and being like, "This is pretty cool." And it would have been like it was like a couple years before 2007 is when Legends of Rock came out. And I remember that game like specifically wanting that one because it just looked cooler and it was just like, it always feels like either games flop at the third one. It's like if the sequel's not so great that then the third one is the tell, or if the sequel's pretty good, then the third one's just gonna solidify it. So that's the one I think a lot of people remember, and I think was like the most popular Guitar Hero. Next, I was like Need for Gran Turismo was good, Forza's good, but Need for Speed, that was my game. That was my racing game, and Need for Speed Underground, released in 2003, literally one of my favorite games. I think I always like customization, and I kind of love that whole customizing the cars, and it had the Tokyo Drift kind of vibe, like those kind of cars, and I loved that game. The Simpsons Hit and Run, 2003. That's another. It was like GTA, minus. It was like Simpsons GTA. That game was so amazing. All the levels you went to were so unreal. Getting to play as like anywhere from like Homer, obviously, or Marge to like Lisa or freaking Bart or Apu and things like that. So just throwing it all in there, and even like my favorite level was the Treehouse of Horror level where it was like all the spooky level like at the very end. That was my favorite level. Tony Hawk's Underground. I've talked about this game before. I literally talk. It's one of my other favorite games of all time. It competes with GTA San Andreas. Yeah, but Tony Hawk's Underground 2003. It was the first game that kind of stepped outside the Pro Skater series, where it was a story and it was a little more open world. You can get off your board and stuff like that. I remember that game to a T and absolutely loved that game and still play it to this day. Resident Evil 4, 2005. I kind of didn't realize that. The first time I ever played Resident Evil 4 was on GameCube. My cousin Colton showed me, but I remember getting it one time at like Blockbuster, and it scared the shit out of me. And it's a hard game, excuse my language. And it's a hard game. Like if you know the Resident Evil series, it's kind of hard. But that game is when it started to switch into kind of a more action-oriented gameplay, where it wasn't just surviving as long as possible type thing. I'll fly through a couple more. There's so many games, dude. Um, ESPN NFL 2K5. See, this one's, I don't feel like anybody remembers this game. It was released in 2004. It's always funny. It stays with that kind of theme of sports games. It has the, year number on the title of the year after it's released, yada, yada. But ESPN NFL 2K5 was Virtual Concepts, which eventually like went into 2K, got bought out by 2K, I think, and it was like 2K's, diving into NFL. And it's an amazing game. I think it has a better gameplay than Madden. Even though Madden was like really good around that time, the mid 2000s, I would say like 05, 06, 07 Maddens are like the best Maddens. But that game is way better. You had like celebrities that you could play against. You had like your own like crib, your own house. You could decorate it with your own trophies and you unlocked points, yada yada. You search it, go look it up. What else? I'll throw in a couple more. What else? The Sims 2, 2004. I played The Sims 1 on PlayStation. I played Sims City even before that. So I remember when Sims 2 came out, really wanting that game. I remember seeing it in magazines. I remember just wanting the game. I remember the first Sims was great. In The Sims 2, I played all the freaking time. I played it with my little sister all the time. And I look back at the game and it doesn't hold up. Unless you have it on like computer, it holds up because you have all the packs and you have so many different. It's just at that time The Sims wasn't made for console yet. It was about The Sims 3 when like there was like an evenness between console and computer gaming. So, but like The Sims 2, it's so vapid and there's nothing in it, but it's still a fun game. Let's see. Last one I'll throw in. SmackDown versus Raw, the first SmackDown versus Raw game, 2004. I played the crap out of the game. I played Rey Mysterio was my guy, Brock Lesnar too, just like that beast of a dude. But I love that game, and there was like the like story mode. I think I'm pretty sure the career mode where you can like play your own like career, and you can like you had like interactions with other wrestlers. I don't know if it's that one actually. I might be tripping on that. Anyways, PlayStation 2. not only is it the best-selling console, but it's my favorite console of all time, and, it's, like, one of those things where, like, if I had money in my life and I had, like, excess money more so, I'd be buying, like, retro gaming stuff, and retro is, like, in quotes because I'd just be buying, like, PlayStation 2. I don't know how retro I'd go, but I love the PlayStation 2. It shaped my gaming, and it makes me just it shaped everything I love about video games till today. Alrighty, friends, that's really all I have to say about that. Episode 45, done. Enough talking, I guess, for now. If you want to listen to this episode or any of like my past episodes or any future episodes, I always make sure to upload it on either or on both, sorry, not either, both YouTube and Spotify. If you find anything I say relatable or enjoyable or in any way, I always appreciate a little bit of support. You could subscribe to my podcast on YouTube. You could subscribe to the podcast on Spotify. You could also follow me on social medias. I would love that very much so. I have an Instagram. I also have a Facebook. I also have Twitter as well. I make sure to link those down in the description as well as like any, channel description, any bio I have. I try to do my best. But yeah, I always appreciate the chance to get on the microphone and talk to y'all. Just had a little fun with this episode, talked about some I want to try to mix in as many serious topics with as many fun topics as possible. The whole point is that I'm as if I think about something, I'll talk about it, and I want to outline things as much as possible, but still try to keep it fresh in the sense that no topic is unlimited, and I'm only trying to gain confidence on talking about more and more things. And we're working on that. But nonetheless, I love y'all. Don't forget to tell someone else you love them as well. Make sure to show up for yourselves every single day and be excellent to each other.